Remember, under the water, nobody can hear you scream. Hi guys, and welcome to my top 25 aquatic horror movies extravaganza. Now, I'm filming this over Easter weekend, and because of that, I originally wanted to do a ranking about the best Easter-themed horror movies. So I got my notepad out and started trying to think of some films. All I could come up with was Critters 2 and Cabin Fever, so I quickly abandoned that idea and decided to do this instead, and I had no trouble filling out 25 spots for this concept. So we've got horror movies today set in oceans and lakes and rivers, we've got creature features, we've got serial killers at sea, we've got diseases at sea, we've got people simply being lost at sea, we've got a nice mixed bag of all sorts really, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of my favourites in this subgenre. I'm quickly going to rattle through some honourable mentions of films that didn't quite make the cut. So Jaws 2 did not make it in. I loved the electrocution of the shark at the end, but the film as a whole, it's too much of a copycat of the first Jaws for me. Anaconda, a fun 90s film, the famous one with Jon Voight and Jennifer Lopez, not made it in. I did find it kind of scary in the 90s, but it's not a film that's aged very well for me, really. I did enjoy it as part of Video Tasty's recent watch party, but it's not featuring in today's ranking. Dead Calm, the thriller with Sam Neill, Nicole Kidman, Billy Zane. Another film I saw in the 90s, but I've never watched it since. It's one of those films that once you've seen it, you don't really feel like revisiting it. And another one from the 90s, Leviathan, that's not made it in, mainly because I'm struggling to remember it really. It is a little bit of an Aliens knockoff at sea, and I remember it being sort of good. Me and my dad rented it a long time ago, but you're not going to see it in the list today. Anyway, Lake Placid has also missed out. Now, I only watched this film last night because it's a film with a bit of a reputation, and I wanted to give it a chance to make my ranking, but even though I found it kind of fun, a lot of the characters were sort of annoying, so it wasn't good enough to make the list today. And I'm sorry to say, if John Bolton's watching this, there's no Sharknado films today. I've still not checked out any of those. Every time I look on the various streaming platforms that I'm a member of, that they are showing some Sharknado films, but it's always the sequels. And because if I'm going to check this series out, I would like to watch them in order. They are never showing the original for some reason, but I'm sure one day I will check out the glory of Sharknado. Right, I've rambled enough. It's time to get into the ranking. Let's head out to sea and see what we've got. So it's time to reveal my 25th favourite aquatic horror movie. Here we go. So number 25 then, we have Blackwater. This is an Australian horror film where crocodiles are the big threat, or it could be alligators. I've never learned the difference between crocodiles and alligators, but it doesn't really matter to me because they're both dangerous as hell. You don't want to come across either one of those two, do you? So this takes place in Queensland, I think. It's that northeast quadrant of Australia where all the crocodiles are. A bunch of people go on a boating trip through the swamps and rivers of this general area. It's very wildernessy, not many people around, and the boat gets flipped by a crocodile, and the characters all scramble to get into the nearby trees, and they're basically stuck there. There's a crocodile down below, and he's not going anywhere until he's had his lunch. So this film stays in the same place for quite some time. It might be a little bit slow for some people, but it's got a fantastically exciting final 15-20 minutes, and the film looks gorgeous. The area where they filmed this whole thing looks absolutely terrific. It's one of those that you might only watch the one time. I've never gone back to it a second time. It's not one that I've ever bought because I'm quite satisfied with my one watch, but I definitely really enjoyed it, so that is our first one today. Number 24, we have Reef, the first of many shark films in this list. This is another Australian one. I tell you what, the Aussies know how to do movies like this. It's all that water and danger that they've got around their island. So it's been a while since I saw this, but essentially it's about a group of people who go on like a yachting trip. I think it's yachts. It's either yachts or just like boats that look like yachts. But they adventure into a part of the sea that has a very dangerous quota of sharks, shall we say, and the boats end up flipping and the characters end up in the water, and they're basically paddling through the ocean trying to find land. Really, really tense, this film, from beginning to end, because you just know that the sharks are going to take some of these people out ultimately. Now, there is a sequel to this called Reef Stalked, which was actually done by the same director, and it looks like it's got like a similar budget, but it's piss poor compared to the first one. First one of these, really, really good. Second one, absolutely not worth bothering with. I just couldn't believe how bad it was, given that it's the same director. So, but yeah, this first Reef film, absolutely worth your time. At number 23, we have Sanctum. This is our first non-creature feature entry in the video. It's another Australian film, actually. Aussie, 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 let's go. So this is about cave diving. We follow this group of expert divers as they're exploring this brand new system under the ground. But then a storm rolls in. It's a really biblical storm, like a proper typhoon type thing. And the caves get flooded, and these divers are trapped under there somewhere. And for the rest of the movie, they've got to get out. They've got to explore this unmapped cave system. Most of the caves are flooded, and they've only got a certain amount of air canisters or whatever you call those things. And it's really exciting. Honestly, it's really, really good, this film. It's a little bit like The Descent in terms of the setup. It's just that there's no monsters, but that's absolutely fine, because if you take the monsters out of The Descent, it's still really exciting in my book. So yes, Sanctum is absolutely top-notch. I wish there were more horror movies that are just about cave diving. Do let me know if you can think of any more. At number 22, we have Rogue. This is another crocodile film. It's also another Australian one. So Radha Mitchell is the star of this. She's probably better known as the lead from Silent Hill, one of my favourite horror films of all time. In this film, Radha is playing a sheriff-type character, or maybe a park ranger. Her and a bunch of tourists get stranded on a little island in the middle of this gigantic river. And there are crocodiles nearby, and they can't get off this island. It's very small, like you could barely fit a house on this island. It's kind of split into two halves, this film. The first half, we follow all these people as they're trying to get off the island, and every time somebody tries, they seem to die. And then late on, we get another section, and I'm not going to spoil what happens in that, just in case you've not seen it, but it's a very, very gripping film, let me tell you. But it's still not as good as Silent Hill, obviously. At number 21, we have Piranha 3D. So this is the first one on this list that I actually own. This is a very colourful film. It's set in Arizona, and you can literally feel the heat and the sunshine from that state coming through the screen at you. Very gratuitous film as well, possibly the most gory film in this ranking. But trust me, by the end of this film, you will fully feel the terror of what it must be like to try and survive a piranha attack. There's one outstanding scene in this where there's about 100 people at some kind of water party just off this promenade, and the piranhas turn up, and it's an absolute bloodbath, but it's brilliantly filmed. There's so many good ideas going on there. It's entertaining all the way through. Christopher Lloyd turns up as a scientist. I wouldn't quite call him a crazy wide-eyed scientist, but he's got a fun little part, Christopher Lloyd. Elizabeth Shue plays a sheriff, and there's various other interesting characters having their own little stories all around the bay. Really, really good stuff. There's a sequel to this as well called Piranha 3DD, which is not in this ranking. It's a little bit of a wasted venture, the second one. It takes place in a water park, and just with that location, it could have been a classic, but there's way too much satire and comedy in the second one. It just doesn't take itself seriously. It's got David Hasselhoff in there, for God's sake. And I mean, I still own the second one, I'm ashamed to say, but it's not a patch on this first one. The first one's got lots of comedy in it as well, but it keeps it on a level. It doesn't quite go too far. It's fun without being stupid. At number 20, we have Ghost Ship. So we've got some supernatural shenanigans this time. This might actually be the only supernatural film in this video, I'm not sure. This film is famous for its opening. So we've got a bunch of people dancing on the deck of a cruise ship, and a steel cable comes loose from overhead and just swoops down and literally dissects all these people through the waist, literally cuts them in half. And we get to see all the gore and its juicy detail, and it takes you back the first time you watch it. It's quite powerful stuff, and the rest of the movie sort of struggles to live up to that, really, but it's still pretty good. We've got a group of scavengers led by Gabriel Byrne, a terrific actor, and him and his motley crew are hoping to go to this abandoned ship and relieve it of all of its gold and all the valuable stuff. But once they get on board, the ghosts of the passengers who died in the prologue start picking off these people one by one. But it's a good watch. It's a little bit let down by a really poor ending. There's a terrible sting in the tail to this film, which just makes absolutely no sense. But it's a good time, and I'm sort of glad to include it. So we've got something that's unlike anything else in the video, really. I'll tell you a film that I wanted to include today, and I just couldn't quite bring myself to do it, and that's John Carpenter's The Fog. And the reason I didn't include it is because I think it would be controversial if I considered that film to be oceanic in nature, because like Blake and his men, they do come from the ocean. A lot of their kills are at sea, but more than half the movie is on land, and I think people would probably raise an eyebrow if I put The Fog into the list. Plus, if I had included it, it would have come like 1 or 2. Number 19, we have Beneath. This is probably one of the least well-known films on this list. It's about a group of youngsters who go to a lake for the afternoon. They get in a rowing boat and they get terrorised by something that resembles like a giant blowfish or something. I'm not entirely sure what this creature is, but it's kind of frightening. What I like about this film is that they've used a lot of practical effects for the creature, and it's really appreciated, because these days, with a lot of these lower budget films like this, they just use CGI creatures, and it's kind of irritating to watch half the time. But with this film, they put some effort in, they put the hard yards in, and for that reason, I'm really pleased to be able to include this film in this video today. I mean, it's not going to blow you away or anything, this film, but I think it's a good watch. I think I caught it on Netflix like a year or two ago, maybe. I'm not sure if it's still on there. The only negative here is that this is another one of those films with one of those stupid one last scare moments that's a little bit contrived, and what they do with this last twist, last scare, is something that I've seen so many times now. It did kind of irritate me, but that's only a small complaint. For the most part, this is a pretty decent watch. Number 18, we have Pressure. Feel the pressure, come play my game, I'll test you. Disclaimer, there's no actual Prodigy music in this film. So what we've got here is a bunch of people who go down to the depths of the ocean on one of those James Cameron style submersibles, and the cable gets cut or something, and they're just stranded deep down, and they can't get back up, and they're running out of air, and it's really claustrophobic, and the pressure's on, and it's really exciting and also very, very believable. I mean, there was that situation recently where some people went down to the Titanic and they died, didn't they? But although those people just blew up rather than got stranded. But I could easily believe that this situation that you get in this film has definitely happened probably at some point somewhere around the world, and imagine how frightening it would be, honestly. I don't think there are any creatures in this film. If there are, it's probably just a brief thing. I don't remember this film being like full of sharks and things that come along. It's mostly about the fact that they're running out of air, and they're getting on each other's nerves, and they just can't think of a way out of this situation. I'm not going to give away whether anybody does survive, but it's a tense, exciting time. It's a good one. Number 17, we have Breaking Surface. This is a film set in Norway or Iceland. Maybe it's somewhere that looks really freezing cold. Like there's glaciers everywhere, and it just looks like the sort of place you just wouldn't want to go diving. I mean, I can understand it when people go diving in the Bahamas or somewhere, but Scandinavia, really? But the two sisters in this film, they do exactly that, and one of them gets her arm trapped in an underwater cave by a boulder that falls down, and the other sister has got to frantically try and free her. She tries all sorts, this girl, and she pushes herself really close to death in this film, just trying to rescue her sister. And it's very, very exciting stuff. It was actually remade by the Americans just last year, I think. I remember seeing the remake at the cinema and thinking, where have I seen that film before? I feel like I've seen it somewhere. I had another film entirely, and the Americans just decided to remake it for whatever reason. But in my opinion, you might as well stick with the original, even though it's got subtitles. You will feel exhausted by the end of this film, and I'm not going to tell you the outcome of it, but it's very, very edge of your seat stuff. At number 16, we have Blackwater Abyss. So this is the sequel to Blackwater, the film that we had at number 25. The first film is probably the most photographic of the two, but this one is more pulse pounding. It takes place in some underwater caves and the water's rising and there's crocs around, and there's one kill in particular that really had me going. I actually saw this in the cinema. It was the back end of COVID times and cinemas didn't really have any new films, so they randomly showed this even though it had already been out for at least a year, and I jumped at the opportunity and I had a really good time watching this on the big screen. I kind of wish they'd make another one of these actually, but I guess where would they go with a third one? They've done crocs outside, they've done crocs in caves. What more can you do? But this is one of those rare examples where you have two films in a series, if you can call it that, and the second one is actually the better of the two. So number 15, we have Deep Blue Sea 2. So this is a straight-to-video sequel to the obviously much more famous Deep Blue Sea 1. But what it lacks in budget and scope, it more than makes up for with its better characters and just having a lot of good, cheesy fun. For example, there are schools of baby sharks in this film that act like piranha, and I don't think I've seen that in any other shark film. So what we've got here is like a science research centre in the middle of the sea, like the first film, but on a smaller scale. But don't let that put you off, because this film is hugely enjoyable. It really surprised me, actually, this one. It's just really decent. It's helped along the way by a really good performance by an actress called Danielle Savray, who plays the lead. She's a criminally underrated actress, though she doesn't do a lot of horror. And honestly, I don't actually think there's that much difference between the three Deep Blue Sea films. They've all got their sort of pros and cons. I've not included part 3 in this ranking, but this is also worth checking out. I'm not going to talk about this film at length, but the final kill in this movie, the final shark death, is the best I've ever seen in any shark movie. It's so squelchily satisfying, it's unreal. So the overall trilogy of Deep Blue Sea is very, very cool, and you should absolutely check out all of them and not just the first one. At number 14, we have Sea Fever. This is a Danish film. It might be a Swedish film, actually. It's one of those Scandinavian countries. So what we've got here is a sea trawler, and what happens is there's like this diseased plankton or something that gets into the water supply and starts killing off these people one by one. So it's like a really dangerous, never seen before infection. It doesn't sound much, this film, but it's beautifully directed. The film just looks absolutely gorgeous, especially the ending. The final couple of minutes of this film just look absolutely beautiful. The whole thing is helped along by a good performance by, I think her name's Hermione Caulfield, who plays the lead. And also in this film is the Scottish actor who plays the villain in Mission Impossible 2, although I can't remember his name. But this is a good one. It might be the only disease at sea type film that we have today. Another one that I was thinking of including but didn't, for similar reasons to why I excluded The Fog, is a film called The Bay, which is also about a disease that originates from sea, but because a lot of that film is concentrated on the land, I decided to omit it. But both together, Sea Fever and The Bay, are a pair of jolly good films. You should absolutely watch both of them. What? Jaws at number 13? It's still a great film. I mean, if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't have put it in this list, but it's just not quite one of the all-time amazing films for me. I've seen it so often since I was a kid as well. I've become a little bit desensitized to it. I must have seen it 8, 9, 10 times, and it just doesn't do an awful lot for me anymore, honestly. There are films ahead of it in this list that I might have only seen once or twice, but I'm just more excited about those films. They do more for me because they're more recent, and yeah, there's a bit of recency bias, I guess, in this list. But I don't think Jaws, anyway, would be one of my favourite horror films ever. Not everybody is going to love all of the horror classics quite the same way. I mean, I love a lot of the horror classics. I love Halloween, I love Dawn of the Dead and Suspiria, you know, some of those allegedly 5-star masterpiece horror films. But for me, Jaws is more of a 4 out of 5. It's great, it's just not beloved to me, and there's no other way of saying it, I guess. So there you are. You can have a go at me if you want, but if everybody had Jaws at number one, it would be a kind of boring world, wouldn't it? But I'm under no illusions. If I did a community post and asked people to vote on the 25 films in this video, I'm quite certain that Jaws would win. But for me, it's just kind of almost great rather than great. At number 12, we have The Shallows. So this is a film about a young woman played by Blake Lively. She's a surfer and she goes out to sea one day. She's getting over something, I think. I'm not sure what, who cares. But she gets injured and she's stuck on like a tiny little rock out to sea. She can actually see the shore from where she is. She's about 500 yards out or something. The shoreline is tantalizingly close, and yet so far, and there's a shark swimming around. There's all these dead carcasses of whales nearby. Clearly the shark has already had a good meal or two, and yeah, most of the runtime we're in this same sort of general area as the character tries various things to get back to shore. The way that this film resolves itself is very satisfying to me, and I just thought it was very, very good. Blake Lively is clearly very, very comfortable here with all the physical stuff that she has to do. It's a very, very demanding role, I think. You can tell that she's going through the ringer for our entertainment in this film, but it's a solid one, this. It says on the front, the best shark movie since Jaws. Well, personally, I think Jaws is the next best shark film after The Shallows, so there. At number 11, we have Deep Rising. This was quite a big budget film that came out at the end of the 90s. It didn't make that much money back, but let's not concentrate on the financials, given the fact that we're like 25 years further on at this point. Let's just focus on the fact that this is a bloody good evening's entertainment, if you ever get the chance. The threat here is an abnormally large kraken type thing, and it's a force of nature, believe me. So we've got a bunch of criminals and good characters as well who end up on an abandoned ocean liner. So a little bit like Ghost Ship in terms of the setup, but it's not the supernatural that we're facing here. It's this ridiculously overpowered thing that lives beneath the waves, and it can get anybody anywhere on the ship. Even though it's a really big ship, like you can be hiding in the toilets or something, and the tentacles of this creature can just like weave down the corridors and somehow find you anyway. The characters get whittled down so fast in this film, like it doesn't hang about, honestly. We've got Famke Janssen in this, of GoldenEye fame, Nick Nolte, or somebody who looks like Nick Nolte, it might not actually be him, and Treat Williams plays a very, very charismatic leading man. It's a decent film. Very unlucky not to make my top 10. To all those people who say that there's no decent horror films in the 90s, as far as I'm concerned, you're not looking hard enough. So just inside the top 10, we have Crocodile. I'm not sure if it's a crocodile or an alligator in this one. It's definitely one of the two. So we get a bunch of spring breakers who are boating in the middle of the woods somewhere, and a crocodile comes along and the characters start dying one by one. There's nothing particularly original or clever about this movie. Tobe Hooper is the director, and he's not exactly putting his best imagination to good use here, but the film's just good and very competently made. All the kills are very satisfying. All the attacks by the crocodile creature are really well done in terms of, you know, the effects that they've used, whatever. I've not actually seen this one in quite a few years. It must be at least 5 years since I saw it. It wouldn't surprise me if it was actually 10 years since I last saw it. I'm well overdue watching this again. I want to pick this up actually and add it to my collection. It's a decent one. A Tobe Hooper review series wouldn't actually go amiss at some point, although having said that, I've already reviewed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's definitely a crocodile in this. The giveaway's in the title. At number 9, we have the original Deep Blue Sea. Now, there was a period of time a few years ago where I started to feel a little bit grumpy about this film. I actually reviewed all 3 Deep Blue Sea films in the early days of the channel, and I think I gave this a lesser score than parts 2 and 3. And I think my reasoning for that at the time was because the characters in part 1 are really bland and dull, especially the main 2. I mean, they are awful characters. And for that reason, I just got a little bit fed up with the movie, but I've kind of come back around now. I've kind of decided to just ignore that side of this film and just concentrate on the good stuff. The fact that we have this amazingly awesome science facility, which is just ingenious in terms of its structure and all the work they've put into it. We've got these turbocharged sharks with a brain hormone zooming down steel corridors and terrorizing budgies and chasing LL Cool J into ovens, and there's a lot of good stuff to enjoy in this film, as long as you ignore the fact that the characterization is kind of shit. I still feel like, on a bang to book ratio, that parts 2 and 3 deserve more credit, given the fact that part 1 had way more money than part 2 and 3, to a point where it's not even funny. Part 1 should be further ahead of part 2 and 3 in terms of quality than it actually is. These 3 films are still very, very close for me, but I'm kind of willing to concede that part 1 still has the greater worth just about. And it's also worth saying that I've heard it said many times by many people that this is the second best shark film after Jaws. Now, that is obviously not the case for me, but in general, that's what I've heard a lot of people say, that is this film's reputation, basically. At number 8, we have the original Piranha that came out at the back end of the 70s. There's about 5 Piranha films now, I think, if you count the TV one. This is still the best of the bunch. It's an awesome time. I love the story for this. We start out at a really odd, abandoned facility in the middle of the woods, and there's like a weird creature that runs across the front of the screen in this film that never appears again. The 2 leads in this film bounce off each other really well. We've got some really strong characters. I think both the lead actors in this film have now sadly passed away, but they carry this film beautifully, and I like their burgeoning romance that they have. And I love how this story escalates. It starts quite small scale, and then it just builds and builds. The military end up coming in, and we've got scenes where boaters and people on dinghies are dying left, right and centre. And I love the ending as well, which perfectly sets up the idea that we might get another sequel, but at sea. And I guess we kind of do with Piranha 2, The Spawning, which is also quite entertaining, but nowhere near as good as this one. No, best Piranha film ever for me. Still the original Joe Dante classic from the end of the 70s. At number 7, we have 47 Meters Down, Uncaged. This is a sequel, even though it's not immediately obvious because it doesn't have the number 2 next to it. So in this film, we basically get these 4 gorgeously hot, young, blonde college students, and they're bored one afternoon, so guess what they decide to do? Well, if you guessed that they went down to the beach and sunbathed and played on their phones, then you've clearly not met very many hot women. Now, what they actually do in this film is far more believable and true to life. They decide to go cave diving in some really dangerous caves, and they get stuck down there, and they're running out of air, and oh, here's the best part, there are underground blind sharks in this film roaming the corridors of the caves. Complete bullshit. But it works in this film because it's just so much fun. It's like this stalk and slash film in the dark, gloomy caves, and the characters are okay, I guess, but the ending is exhilarating. I mean, when it got to the end of this film and I saw the final action set piece, I was like, whoa, this is good stuff. The guy who directed this is Johan Roberts, who was basically plucked from this and given the job of directing Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. So he was promoted in the movie world on the strength of this movie. I'm not sure if he did anything else between this and Resident Evil, but in general, this was a director on the up at the time that he did this, and I can understand why, because for a direct-to-video sequel, this is bloody good stuff. And you don't have to have seen the first one to watch this one, because both 47 Meters Down movies are completely separate from each other. So if you come across this on streaming, don't be dissuaded from watching it if you haven't seen the first. This will undoubtedly prove the most controversial moment of the video, but may I remind you, this is a personal list. I am but one man. I haven't produced these results from interviewing 100 people or anything like that. It's just my list, and I just happen to love Jaws 3 more than Jaws 1. I'm not taking the piss, genuinely. This film has scared the crap out of me since I was a kid. This film was always on TV. So in the UK, it used to be the case that Jaws 1 and Jaws 2 would turn up on the BBC channels, and ITV had Jaws 3, and I don't think anybody had Jaws the Revenge. If you wanted to watch Jaws the Revenge, probably you had to go to the video store and buy it under the counter like you were buying porn, you know, big overcoat and a hat, so nobody could see that you were watching that crappy film. No, I think it was on BBC One at some point, Jaws the Revenge. But Jaws 3 was always on ITV, and I loved it, but it freaked me out. I mean, every single kill in this film is kind of freaky, really. The opening kill with Overman, it's a damn good kill. And the one with the guy in the shark's mouth, you cannot understand what an effect that had on me. The concept that you could be in a shark's mouth but not dead, how scary would that be? And I think eventually they started showing this film on British TV, but with that scene cut out, because they just came to the conclusion, no, that's way too terrifying. Because I definitely watched this film with that scene missing, and I was super mad. Because even though it terrified me, I still wanted to see it. But this film is so much fun. That's the key word here, fun. It takes place in like a water park thing, and there's always something going on. The film's really colourful, great characters. I love the rapport between all the main players. They go out for drinks together, and they just have a great bond. The leading lady in this, I can't understand why she didn't go on to bigger and better things. She's a good character. Dennis Quaid plays a fantastic leading man. Yes, the special effects are utter shit, but it doesn't destroy the movie for me. That's the thing. The idea of all these underwater walkways and things, oh God, it really did send the shivers up me as a kid, and I can still remember those feelings when I'm watching the film now. I absolutely love Jaws 3. I wouldn't call myself a super fan of it, but this will always be my favourite Jaws film, and don't try and tell me otherwise. Number 5, we have Alligator. So they recently released a 4K for this, basically a box set that has Alligator 1 and 2. I've not actually seen number 2, which surprises me because I love this first one. There's a guy I follow on YouTube who just recently did a video about that box set, and I'm super jealous, honestly, because I want this set. It's definitely on the bucket list for me this year, I think, even though it is on the pricey side. But this is a really cool movie. It's not really an ocean movie, but because it's got this particular creature in it, I will allow it. So it starts out in the sewers, but then it comes out and starts terrorizing like wedding receptions and things. And the characters are really strong in this. Watching the leads in this reminds me a lot of watching Piranha. It's just a really solidly well-made movie all round. I'm not sure if the main creature is an alligator or a crocodile, but it's definitely one of those. At number 4, we have the original 47 Meters Down. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this pair of movies, but the original is still the best. So we've got two young women here. I'm not sure if they are sisters or just very good friends, but what I can tell you is that the actresses playing them are Mandy Moore and Claire Holt, and they are both absolutely superb in these roles. So they're going like cage diving off the coast of Mexico somewhere, I think, and the cage snaps off the cable, and they end up on the seabed, so trapped in this cage, and there's sharks all over the place. They're running out of air. It's a very bleak situation. It is one of those films that is basically set in the same location for the whole movie, but there's so many cool facets to this story, great little ideas throughout it, twists and things you don't expect. Some really great writing, honestly. There's even a cool little conspiracy theory about this film that maybe the cage was dropped deliberately. There's a wonderful sequence where one of the women swims quite a distance, and then she just comes across this really massive expanse where she realizes that they weren't actually on the seabed. It goes down a lot further just off this bit that they were, and it almost sort of gave me vertigo, this scene, honestly. But it's a wonderfully exciting film, and it looks terrific. Even on the DVD that I've got, I've not got a Blu-ray for this, I've only got a DVD copy, but it looks gorgeous. It's just an amazing film, and definitely worthy of one of the highest spots in this ranking. At number 3, we have Crawl, which is currently the highest ranked film today that I haven't yet gotten around to buying. But that is going to change, believe me, because Crawl is phenomenal. I saw it in the cinema and I had a whale of a time. Not that there's whales in this, no, it's crocodiles or alligators, one of the two. It might be both, actually, in this one. It could be crocodiles and alligators living together. So we've got a young woman here played by Kea Scolodario, a terrific young actress. She's got so many good credits behind her already. She's done Pirates of the Caribbean and Resident Evil, and I would suggest that this is the best of all the films she's done so far. I think she's a British actress, I'm sure of it. But in this, she's playing this young champion swimmer, and she goes to visit her father in Florida, but there's like a massive storm happening, and by the time she gets to this place, she ends up like taking refuge under the house. It's like a house on stilts kind of thing. We don't get those in the UK. And there are like crocodiles that have washed in from the sea because everywhere's flooded. So it's a little bit like Hard Rain, kind of. And she's got to get out of this predicament. It's not a singular location film like some of the films in this list. We do go to various places in the surrounding area, but the film is relentless. I mean, wherever she goes, there are just more crocodiles, but it just doesn't let up, this movie. It's really, really cool, very exciting. Last I heard, they were going to do a Crawl 2, but I've not heard anything for quite some time, so I don't know if that possibility has faded out or not, but whatever. We've still got this one. It's a truly great film, and I strongly advise you go and see it. Don't crawl your way to going to see it. Run. Sorry. So at number 2 then, we have Underwater. I never thought I would see the day that a film helmed by Kristen Stewart would be at number 2 in one of my film rankings, but that is just the times that we are living in. Seriously, this actress has come on leaps and bounds since those god-awful Twilight films. And so was Robert Pattinson, to be fair. I'm really impressed with both of them. But this is a case in point, because this film is wonderful. It didn't do very well. It was sort of a victim of that COVID era where any film in the cinema wasn't making a lot of money. And for that, I guess we will never see an Underwater 2. But this is extraordinarily good if you've not seen it. It's about this mining operation. There's like a massive tower that stretches from the top of the ocean right down to the seabed, and the building at the very bottom gets cut off from the rest of it because of an accident, and you've got all these characters trapped on the seabed. The pressure of the water on top of them, they can move around potentially to other outposts that have been set up on the seabed because they've got these like space suits that can take a lot of pressure, but there's aliens down there and things that they don't know about at the start of this film. There's a lot in this to unpick, but it's so exciting. I mean, they could potentially run out of air. They could potentially implode from the water pressure. They could get eaten. They've got so many problems in this film. I did a review on this film a long time ago, and I only gave it 3 out of 5. And the reason for that at the time is because on first viewing, I wasn't sold on it. I had a big problem with the beginning because this film jumps straight into the action, like literally in the first couple of minutes. Some people see that as a positive. With me, I do prefer the more traditional slow build-up where you get to know the characters a little bit. I especially would have liked a scene where the characters in this just take an elevator down to the building before anything happens, and then we could have had a slow build-up of terror and tension as we realise just how deep we're going with this movie, but whatever. Over time, on repeat viewings, I've come around to the fact that this movie just jumps straight into it, and it is a little bit of a shorter run time than maybe I would normally expect for this type of film, because it feels like aliens underwater, yet it's still your sort of traditional 90-minute horror movie. But it's so good, honestly. Absolutely check this one out if you've never seen it. It is one of the surprise films of the last few years for me, but it's not my number 1. We are now about to find out what that is. So yeah, at number 1, I have Triangle. This is the cleverest film I have ever seen in my life. It's not quite the best film I've ever seen in my life, although there's not that many films ahead of it. But this film is amazing. Like, the guy who wrote this film is a genius as far as I'm concerned. There is literally a website where you can go and read about the intricacies of this plot. because there's just so much to kind of unpick. There's so much about this film that you won't even realise until you read all the stuff on this website. It goes so deep. I mean, this is only like a 90-minute, 100-minute film, but there's so much packed into it. So much going on that you might not even realise when you're watching the movie. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So basically, it starts out quite a simple horror premise. We've got this woman and some people that she loosely knows, and they get into trouble at sea on a yacht. Nothing special happening so far. And then they come across this like abandoned ocean liner that's just drifting through the ocean randomly. So there's kind of like a Bermuda Triangle thing going on here, even though geographically I'm not sure we're actually in that part of the earth. We might be somewhere else. I'm not entirely sure on that, but we are somewhere in the ocean, and there are like time-bending things going on. We get paradoxes and time looping back around on itself and weird shit happening. It gets a little bit sci-fi, this film, but God, it's great. There's a random killer in like a Friday the 13th Part 2 mask running around, and we don't know what's going on with that for a while. It's just weird, but God damn does it all fit together like a glove. Once you get to the end of the movie, the final twist, you'll be like, holy shit, that's how it all ties together. It's so neat. And then if you're like me, you'll be like wanting to watch the movie again to like catch the bits you didn't catch the first time around. I've spent quite a lot of time reading about this film online and all the things about the plot and stuff. It's just an unbelievable film. I've watched the commentary of it. The director, talks about various aspects of it. He's very humble about this film, honestly. Like, he's just describing some random thing that he directed, but for me, it's just one of the most undervalued films in all of horror. It's just an unbelievable piece of work as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm going to say that cliche that it's not for everybody. Some people just want to watch a horror film. They want to watch Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Fine. Some nights I just want to watch something like that. But if you want something that goes a step further and just is so clever and intricate and... this film is gold dust. It really is. So, Triangle, number 1 for me. That was my top 25 aquatic horror films. Do let me know your favourites in the comments, and try not to give me too much shit about Jaws. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.